Welcome back, everyone, to another live broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. I want to thank all of you for again tuning in today. And can you believe it? It's the last show of the week already. This week has absolutely flown by, but I'm glad about that because I've been looking forward to this show all week long. In fact, I've been looking forward to this show since before the end of last year. And you know how things work on the Kev Baker Show? Either there's something going on with me, there's something going on with the guest, or for whatever reason, it usually ends up the universe dictates when certain shows are going to happen. And I think it's a similar situation here because the timing seems absolutely perfect to bring on two massive friends of the show. And these are the shows that I really, really get enthusiastic about. You know, it's great bringing on all the big names in alternative media, and it really is. I enjoy doing that. But we've heard all of that before. And it's time for something fresh. You know, we always talk about how we're at the end of one age and on the cusp of another. And we need to hear new information from new people out there. One person who springs to mind is Brendan Drackler. Now, he's got his PhD from the Rochester Institute of Technology, and he's doing all things astrophysics. And, you know, not a lot of people that listen to KBS had ever heard of Brendan, but look at him now, in his own podcast, absolutely flying. And tonight we're going to hear from two people who I think we're going to be hearing from more in the future, not only on this show, but on other shows too. Before we get into it tonight, let me just get people to pencil into their diary, put on their calendar. Monday, we're going to have Max Egan coming on all the way from Down Under. Now, today on the daytime stream on YouTube, I took a little look at what the Aussie Man Reviews from YouTube was saying about the Australian fires. And I also took a little listen to what Max Egan has been saying about the terrible scenes that are coming out of Australia right now. And when I was watching his 5-part series, I think I got about 2 parts into it, and I went and messaged Max, so he's going to come on Monday. And like I say, the universe always does things for a reason. And tonight, it's the start of our journey down under, because we're bringing on two massive friends of the show. Like I say, real people, real archaeologists, no less. Yes, today we're going to be joined by Dan and Jess Knigge. And they recently completed their bachelor's degree in archaeology at Flinders University, Adelaide, South Australia. Now, Jess works for the South Australia Museum and is a caretaker of around 40,000 Aboriginal Australian artefacts. Now, they will be undertaking their postgraduate studies this year, and they have travelled through Arum Land, a place up at the top end of Australia where the Aboriginal people still live as they have for many thousands of years, and have worked on the maritime shipwreck artefacts at the Museum of Tropical Queensland. And today, all the way from down under, they are here live on the Kev Baker Show. So without any further ado, let's welcome Jess and Dan. How you doing, guys?
Hi, Kev. Good, thanks. How are you?
Hi, Kev. How you going?
Oh, Dan, it's, should I say dang, dude. It's great to be here with you guys. No, it's been really nice getting to know you guys in the YouTube chat, and it's great to be joined by you, big friends of the show. And like I was saying to you before the show, guys, I mean, you tick a lot of the boxes that I'm looking to be ticked. You've got the archaeology thing going on. You've got this knowledge about the Aboriginal people. You're down under, which is a big winner for me as well. But also on a more serious note, you're also right there at ground zero of what's going on in Australia right now. And I'd like to start there, if I may, guys, because just before we came on air, I was looking at a story about Kangaroo Island. Now, as soon as I called you up, you were telling me you're starting to smell smoke where you are, and it's actually coming from that island. So I'm going to let you guys tell the audience how it is in Australia right now and what's going on with these fires.
Yeah, so Australia is a huge place. It's very isolated. and we're the driest continent, and we live in the driest state on the driest continent. So everything's really dry. We've got a major issue with the government taking money from under the table here in Australia, and corruption within our government is a problem. They're harvesting a lot of the water on the floodplains, which is stopping the flow of a lot of the creeks and rivers, basically causing everything to dry really, really quick. And all the fires got all this fuel in it that's about 17 years old. So it's burning real hot and real fast. And we've had 40 degrees Celsius for a few days in a row with high winds. And it's basically just destroying everything in its path. And it's to the point where it's unbeatable. Humans cannot contain these fires.
So up until yesterday, we really felt a bit removed from the fires. Most of them are happening in New South Wales and Victoria and have been happening since at least the last couple of months. They started near Sydney going on 2 months ago now. And we've felt pretty lucky being down here in South Australia in that we're quite a long way away from the major centres of the bigger fires. But so last night we started to be able to smell smoke from Kangaroo Island, and that started nearly a week ago, the fire over there, and it's out of control. It's burned a third of the island. We can see the smoke, we can smell the smoke, and it really makes it hit home. I mean, it's one thing to be hearing and seeing about these fires all across Australia, but to actually be able to smell, Kangaroo Island, which we've grown up visiting and knowing about all our lives. There's good archaeology there. There's communities there, and you can smell it burning, and it is devastating. It comes with a lot of emotional sort of feeling and reaction when you smell it and can see it like that.
This is one of the things that really came across to me, guys, when I was watching some of the news reports from Australia. I mean, there was obviously farmers who have lived the land, they've worked the land. And if you could just turn the volume just a little bit, because we're getting a little bit of feedback again, just a tiny bit. It's heartbreaking. And to see real Australians, in the heart of this, where it's going on. Now, I was watching Max Egan today, and he was blowing my mind. He was showing me all these private water dams and how the rivers are all dry and things like that. And I want to ask you guys, I mean, how much is this contributing to what we're seeing right now?
Oh, hugely, and the fracking as well that's going on, draining all of our aquifers, and as I was explaining to you before the show started, the cubby farm and them growing cotton and growing things that they shouldn't be growing here in Australia because it's too dry. They're ripping the heart out of the Murray River, which is our main water source here in South Australia, and up higher, they're diverting masses of this water to grow cotton, and it's just greed, and it's taking it away from the plants, the animals, the people. It's just destroying Australia, and not to even mention the geoengineering as well, which is, Max has done a bit of work on as well, I know. But
guys, it's almost like the perfect storm, Jess. You take everything with the water, you take the geoengineering, you take the harsh summer, you add all of it together, and we're watching this, like Max described it, a firestorm that's taking place right now.
This fire is unusual for here in Australia. This is the thing that people have got to understand. We've always had fires. Australia has always had fires and always will. We've always had big fires, but we've never had this
out of control.
Many out of control at one time. And the firefighters are coming in with reports that are bizarre and strange and unheard of to us and are new.
Yeah, the fires are behaving in ways they haven't behaved in before. And, a lot of this has to do with mismanagement of the land as well. For thousands of years, Aboriginal people performed something called fire stick farming, where they would burn off all of the bushfire-prone lands And they do it for a number of reasons. For hunting, so they didn't have to travel as far. They'd only burn on wet ground after a lot of moisture, and they'd burn around gullies and stuff, so that when at night time, when the fire would hit the gullies, it would burn out. And they would do this seasonally, so that it just didn't have a chance for things to build up, fuel to build up, to fuel these fires to this level where they're just so hot that they just can't be stopped. And that's the issue, is that we've been deliberately mismanaging the land. And the government knows how to manage it, and they haven't been, so.
And of course, over here, Dan, we're told all the time, this is, this is climate change. This is what it looks like.
It's look, this has been planned for a long time here in Australia, and there's a general consensus going around with all the boys and all the mates and the camaraderie that she'll be all right, mate. We live in the best place in the world. Well, let me tell you that we are super controlled by the elite and by the United Nations. We are definitely geo-engineered here in Adelaide, and they're definitely taking money from under the table. And this is the result of it all, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. And if you look, they got a 2062 plan here in Australia, and it's to build a high-speed rail between Melbourne and Sydney to make them smart cities, to build another 6 cities to help the influx and the growth of population here in Australia. So that's in the next 50 years. So by doing this, they're buying all the farming lands that are now really cheap because they've been burnt, and they're able to put on their high-speed rail and continue to build a future Australia, a technological Australia. But the problem is, at what cost is it? And these places that are burning, the reason why there's so much fuel there as well is because they're national parks that have closed the parks off to people. So
when they stopped the logging 20 years ago, and they locked up the parks, they stopped burning their bushfire-prone land, and so this fire's been building for about 20 years. And the problem is with older fuel, it burns hotter than newer fuel. So the older the fuel, the hotter it burns. So some fuel that's 20 years old will burn on average 17% hotter than fuel that's around 4 years old. So that's having an impact as well.
You know what really sticks out from what you've said, guys, is and I'm getting really bad feedback again. I don't know if your speakers are close to your mic or.
Oh, that might be what it is. Yeah.
It's okay. Don't worry. Even if you just mute up, when I'm talking, that'll be just. That's it. I think that's it. There we go. Yeah, one thing you said there, and it was that I can still. Yeah, if you mute up on Skype, I think that'll stop it. There we go. Yeah. So you mentioned there that the firefighters were actually saying that these fires are behaving like fires they've never experienced before, and that's similar to what we were being told about California as well, guys. And I don't do coincidences, and there's no way that years of fires both in California and in Australia, and you've got experienced firefighters who have been fighting fires for years. And they're both independently saying that these fires are acting differently than fires they've seen before. Now, I'm not going conspiratorial because there's no need to. This is serious enough as it is. But that's really weird, guys, is it not?
Yeah.
And if you get a chance, watch all the Max Eigen's reports, because he details it really well. And he's got a lot of interviews from a lot of firefighters on Ground Zero.
I've sent you a couple of interviews there with a couple of one's with a firefighter and one's with a guy that fought for 13 hours to save his property, and just them explaining and detailing about these fireballs that are just huge, And that's one of them.
Yeah, how about we take a listen to what this guy's got to say here? Here we go. And this is a firefighter that's right in the heart. He's on the front line, guys, okay? So let's take a listen to what this gentleman here has to say.
I'm in the main Brigade in Northern New South Wales and Senior Deputy Captain. Been a member for 18 years.
So why have you decided to come along this morning?
I guess just to wake people up. I mean, I've been an activist now for 10 years and been in the Royal Fire Service for 18 years, so this is like a full circle happening for me now. Yeah, and we're just seeing in the Royal Fire Service, we're seeing things we haven't seen before, time and time again since 2000. So that's fire behaviour, doing things that it's not supposed to be doing. And now this year we're seeing a fire that no one thought was possible. We've always seen big fires, but not so many.
Now, guys, what the heck? Because fires are fires, right? It's one of the elements, right? It shouldn't be acting differently, okay? I mean,
I know.
This is really strange. It really is.
It's bizarre to hear it, isn't it? It is bizarre.
And Dan, you were telling me as well, and this segues nicely into, you know, the main kind of stuff that we're going to be getting into tonight. But historically, Australia's had to deal with bushfires, right? But you were telling me the Aboriginal people, that they used to play a pivotal role in this kind of season when it came round. So can you kind of tell us what they used to do and why it wasn't quite as dramatic or as devastating as we're seeing now?
Yeah, well, the Aboriginal people could read the weather. They understood the landscape. They knew what was around. And one example I can give you is that when I was driving into Arnhem Land, so it takes about 3 solid days to drive from Adelaide up the north of Australia. And as we were driving, we could see heaps of smoke. And we started to get worried. And as we were driving closer and closer, we were driving along the road. And along the perimeter of the road, the rangers and we're all lighting fires. And so in some parts of Australia, they still do fire stick farming, and they still do controlled burn off. And this promotes new growth, and it's great for the vegetation. It's great for the topsoil. And this has always been a good thing in Australia.
Our soil is very delicate here because it's been a long time since we've had volcanic activity and since we've been near, areas where there's upwelling of minerals and stuff. So our soil is actually really depleted of nutrient and of minerals. So it's almost essential. It was almost essential for them to do that burning, just for that aspect alone, to renew the soil and have the ash put much needed minerals into that soil to then regrow the vegetation that they needed. So that was one of the main reasons. And also, as I mentioned earlier, was to prevent these big mega fires from happening. Like, they were obviously aware to some degree that it was needed on that front as well to get rid of this fuel, so that come bushfire season, which we're in now, these fires wouldn't get out of control and rage across the country.
You see the issue, Kev, as well with the fires that we got burning. So the humus soil content, which is the top layer of soil, which is where all the minerals are kept, which is where all the plants grow and everything. So the fires now are burning so incredibly hot that all that top humus soil is burnt. So
there won't be any regrowth.
The regrowth will take a long, long time. So this fire has absolutely devastated Australia and will continue to for generations to come. So it's not the last you've heard about these fires. It's not going to go away.
No, absolutely. And guys, I hope that I can come back to you from time to time to get a real take on what's happening down there in Australia with these fires. Because like you say, unfortunately, I don't think they're going away anytime soon. But I hope, I pray that something, something can be done. And who knows, miracles sometimes happen. I don't know. I find it really intriguing, though, about that train line. That's something I'm going to be reading more up on. I've heard a couple of people talking about that. But it's just another example. And your Prime Minister, I'm not even going to use his name. He doesn't deserve to be named. some of the we were
We call him ScoMo here.
why he wasn't attacked when he was going round these people that had lost their homes is beyond me. We watched him today on the stream, and he physically it was close to assaulting somebody just so he could grab their hand, get a handshake, so the cameras could take a picture of it. It's disgusting, but at least there's something we've all got in common. Our governments are so out of touch, and they just don't care, guys.
That's it. Absolutely. You said it. And I mean, how else can you say that when you go on holiday, you know, when these fires started, because that's what our Prime Minister did.
And you know, it's Australia, and there's such history down there. And maybe some people around the world, they don't realise that. And I always used to get taught, you know, this out of Africa idea. And I'm not saying the out of Africa idea is totally wrong. I'm not poo-pooing it. However, over the years, I've been listening to shows and podcasts and reading books, as we all do. And there's been this thing that's always come up time and time again, and it really interests me. And Dan, you mentioned it to me totally independently.
Oh, you get me excited, Kev.
Yeah. And it's like, did we maybe, or are we looking in the wrong place with Africa? Should we maybe be looking at Australia? So guys, I'm going to come to you on this. Dan, I know you're absolutely enthusiastic. I love your style, man. Talk to me, dude. Tell me, I'm not mad, am I? Australia could play
No. So look, let me give you a quick background. So 10 years ago, when I was playing football and I was on Facebook and did not care too much about the history, I just wanted to travel the world, and archaeology provided such a good adventure and a good way to see everything. And then I started to learn that the Aboriginal culture here in Australia is the oldest continuous living culture on the planet. And I just think about it, that's huge. And if they're the oldest living culture on the planet, then there has to be some evidence here, there has to be some stories here, and there's got to be some real rich information that has not yet been told. And so there's quite a few sites
that contests the out of Africa theory, because apparently out of Africa occurred between 80 and 120,000 years ago. People started migrating out of Africa. And up until relatively recently, the accepted date for Australian occupation was around 60,000 years. However, there have been some sites that are contentious of this date, and we're looking in the realm of between 80 and 100,000 years for some of these sites, which would contest the out of Africa theory. So how, you know, and a couple of them are down quite low in Australia, so it would mean that they'd already been here for quite some time to have been able to, if they did come by boat, the way mainstream archaeology tells us they did, then that would mean they had to be here quite a bit longer than that to get down as far as what some of these sites are. So there's a guy called Bruce Fenton. He's written a book. It's brilliant. It's called, I can't think of what it's called, but it argues the out of Africa theory, and he does so really well. He puts his argument forward using sites from Lagoa Santa in Brazil and several Australian sites that have far more antiquity than what we've been previously told. So,
one site, one archaeologist that I have always looked up to, so that's Jim Bowler, and he discovered Mungo Man, which is possibly the most popular site, and Mungo Man was pretty popular because it was dated to around 40 to 60,000 years ago. But see, the issue with dating in archaeology, so the two main techniques that they use here in Australia are radiocarbon dating, or C14 dating, and OSL, optically stimulated luminescence dating. A little bit of thermoluminescence dating, but that's not so much. So basically,
now guys, hold that thought, because we're going to be coming up on the date, on the break in just a moment. You've got me into carbon dating. We'll be back in just a moment, folks. Don't go anywhere. We're still live on YouTube, guys, but this is brilliant so far. You're absolutely nailing it. And I hate this because I like to have the #1 accent on the show, right? You've got Anne. Anne's like a slabbering idiot in the corner. She's a big fan of Dan already. I'm just warning you, Jess. Okay, but guys, I hope you're having a good time so far because I'm really loving the information that you're giving us so far. And I know we had you penned in to stay for an hour today, but I'm shameless. So if we need to go overtime with it being a longer show, don't feel like you have to cram everything in, Dan.
Well, it's not. I know that's the issue, isn't it? There's so much, but I'd love if we get a chance. I've got a Dreamtime story written down about 2 kangaroos that I'd love to read out. It's not very long, but it's just a bit interesting.
I think that's the perfect way to come back. And then we'll get back into the whole carbon dating. And I want to know about these Gosford Glyphs. And for people out there who haven't heard about the Gosford Glyphs, just hold on. Wow, this is going to blow your mind. But guys, while we're here just now, we're waiting to go back to TFR. I mean, Jess, what was it that really inspired you to get into the archaeological kind of side of things?
Okay, so when I was 10 years old, I had a teacher who was obsessed with ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, and she basically threw the curriculum out that she was supposed to be doing and had us doing plays and painting murals and paper mache and sarcophaguses, and it was all happening. And I just thought, this is great, like this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be an archaeologist. I want to, I'm fascinated with history, and I always was fascinated with history, but I always felt as though something was missing. There was something we weren't being told. And I started my degree around 10 years ago. Just met Dan just after I started my degree, probably about 2 years after. And he was, I don't even know why he was doing archaeology. He just thought it was a good thing to do, I suppose. And we both were really interested because archaeology is about material culture. So we were both interested in civilizations that had a lot of material culture. So South America and Egypt and these types of cultures that have a lot of stuff that they've left behind. But we sort of had a bit of an awakening in 2012, I guess you could say, and
we've all been there, Jess. Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah. So I started looking into Eric von Daniken and this ancient alien thing, and I was just hooked. I was like, wow, I just have to know more, and sort of it's been a bit of a journey since then, and I'm thankful that we woke up close to the beginning of our degree so that we weren't actually brainwashed for the entirety of our degree like most people are. So we sort of came into the degree with an awareness that there is an alternative to what they're teaching us in universities. And
when you're going through that university process, this is one of the things that I've been really encouraged by. And it seems to be in alternative media, we always think, oh, science, so close-minded, and that academia, they always stick to the party line. But I find that people like you, new ones coming through universities, you have got new ideas that challenge the paradigms that are out there. And it's a generational thing. It sounds horrible, but once some of these people that have based their careers on specific dates aren't like hooking their careers to anymore and they've got nothing left to lose, maybe then we'll start to see new ideas, new dates being given. And this 100,000-year thing for Australia, let's get back into it, guys. Stand by. Here we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, what a show it has been so far. I've been looking forward to this one. We're going all the way back down under. And I know there's some people on the internet think that Australia doesn't exist, but let this put all of that to bed. Yes, indeed. I've got 2 live Australians here with me. They're good friends of mine, and I hope they're going to come back on the show time and time again. I love them already. We've got Dan and Jessica Knigge. Now, they were getting into the whole, perhaps we should be looking at out of Australia versus out of Africa. But before we dive back into that, I have to come to Dan, because I've done shows on kangaroos before, Dan. And I think they're the most fascinating creatures on Earth. I would never mess with one. They are ripped, brother. You don't go toe-to-toe with a kangaroo. But you were telling me you've got a bit of a Dreamtime story about not one but two kangaroos, right?
Yeah, this is something I read not long ago, and I've got a poster of it in my office. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a painting that was done to depict this Dreamtime story.
And talk it again.
And it's one of the most important to the Walpiri people, and it's based on the creative adventures of two kangaroos, the Mullanjutta story. The dreaming story describes how these ancestors travel across the Walpiri country and form geographical features along the way. And
Sorry.
and the kangaroo ancestors, so one kangaroo and one euro, which is a smaller relative of the kangaroo, become frightened by the approach of a dingo. They bound away, and one of them, who at this point has a spear for a tail, drags his tail along the ground and gouges out a channel to form what is now Waite Creek in Northern Territory. They run off to the Walgaroo where they camp. The next morning they proceed to Jillaroo to paint up or to decorate themselves and each other and perform ceremonies. Telling of their narrow escape from the dingo, the kangaroo ancestors travel on, camping next to Pulapuruluru, where they climb a hill to survey the country. Then they move on to Wadalwanu, and having gone without food for several days, they become quite hungry. Using hair string that they made for ceremonial use, they fashion their waist belts, which they clinch tight to relieve their hunger. They then camp at a place called Niripi. A huge snake at Kangjirai smells the kangaroo and travels to Niripi in the hope of catching and eating them. The fearful kangaroo flee in different directions, losing the snake. Later, the kangaroo ancestors meet up at Niripalangu, where they camp. They travel on, and at Kilpali Waterhole, they see emus coming. I can't pronounce some of these place names. I'm sorry.
Kuchiminyungu.
They gather and eat honey. They gather and eat honey. What they cannot finish, they coat themselves with as protection from the heat. Refreshed, they make two large string crosses, decorate themselves, and perform increased ceremonies. One of the kangaroo ancestors dances with the cross vertical behind his back, simulating the swaying branches of the eucalyptus trees that grow beside the waterhole. The next morning, they camp at Juru, where one of the kangaroos makes a new handle for his spear thrower. The following night is spent at Julhanta, the site of the Nilpiri community. A soakage is formed where they lay down to sleep and eucalyptus trees sprout, embodying some of the ancestral power. At Panguana, some of the Mandanas, they grind acacia seeds into meal and cook their cakes in the ashes of a fire. As they approach Karaku, the places of red ochre, they hear dingoes howling. The dingoes are performing ceremonies at the hill of Wurundjeri. The frightened kangaroo ancestors flee, being chased by the dingoes. And so that's the end of the Dreamtime story. But so basically the Dreamtime stories don't have a beginning and they don't have an end.
Well, they do. Dreamtime doesn't have it has a beginning, but it doesn't have an end. And Aboriginal concept of time is very different to Western concept of time. They have an all-encompassing view, and their Dreamtime stories are graphic and cognitive systems which represent connections to their landscape. So they're like a primary mechanism for sort of understanding and organising the significance of places And each dreaming myth has an accompanying map with reference incidences and places associated with ancestors. And the maps recount sites along dreaming tracks to assess resources, to tell them how they should behave, to give them their kinship laws, and so on and so forth. It's basically a way of remembering a great deal of information and being able to travel across their country and being able to recognise what places they can get water from, what places they can get food from, what seasonal changes they need to be looking out for that give them their cue to move on. And so dreaming stories are a way for an oral culture to remember copious and vast amounts of information. But there are also levels to dreaming as well. So that's just that would be what you would call the basic level that everybody sort of knows, and then there are different levels as well.
Now, when you talk about the dreaming, is this the same as your South American shaman and maybe taking DMT, stuff like that? Or is this just astral projection? How does this work? I mean, how does this come through to them?
So the dream time is three things, basically. It's a sacred and heroic time long ago when spirit beings set the sun, moon and the stars in their courses, when they created the earth, the material life and the spiritual life. It's these same ancestor beings also creating the laws and rituals to be adhered strictly to, and these laws and rituals provide meaning and perpetuated their way of life. And it is also the storage of spirit power into plants, animals and sacred sites. So for example, a rocky outcrop or a waterfall or a waterhole, so it creates meaning for those things. So the term dreaming refers to an individual's particular knowledge of the dream time. So the dream time is basically it's an all-encompassing worldview. It's not an historic event, but it corresponds to the whole of reality. It has a beginning, but it is eternal. Aboriginal people don't have a name for abstract time. So it's a vertical line in which the past underlies and is within the present. So the power of dreaming is still available, and knowledge of sacred sites is sacred and imparted to few. So dream time is the unity of waking life and dream life. It underpins their whole society.
That is fascinating. Now, when you say sacred sites, and I'm thinking of archaeological sites here as well, obviously, I mean, what are some of the more famous ones that are in Australia that you can think of?
Yeah, well, going back, I'll start back with Mungo Man and why that's so significant for here in Australia. So it's the oldest burial ritualistic site
in the world.
So Mungo Man was found with jewellery. Those bones have now been repatriated back to the traditional owners as well. So the traditional owners have a key and the archaeologists have a key, and the skeleton's locked away in a vault. So it's kind of hard to do some dating on that. But one of the other more recent sites that were found is a place called Moyle, or its English name is Point Ritchie, and it's on the south coast of Australia in Victoria. So it's probably about a 6-hour drive from my house.
Yeah, on the Hopkins River.
So this site's pretty significant because there was a massive volcano eruption, which basically geologically created a perfect time capsule. And we've found shell deposits underneath the layer of volcanic ash. So we know it have to be older than the volcano eruption. That's how we're able to date it. And so there's shell deposits and shell middens and fireplaces, and that's been dated
80 to 120,000 years.
Yeah, so that's in a place called Warrnambool. That's probably our most significant archaeological discovery that's going through the mainstream
at the moment
here in Australia.
And that's the one that they are really unwilling almost to admit to this date because of the implications that it has for world history.
Well, this is the really fascinating thing, guys, because I honestly think that's why we don't hear much about Australia, because then it really is going to cause people to question the mainstream story about where we came from and things. But looking at this Mungo man, I mean, how tall, if you know, I mean, is it above average size? Is this a giant type figure? How kind of tall are we looking at here?
Well, Aboriginal people were usually shorter than what the average Western person is today. But I'm not actually.
I know when I speak to Joe Joseph, he's going to say to me, "How big was that skeleton, Kev?" Because he's going to immediately think of giants and things like that.
No, I just don't think I don't think there's much there for reference, really, is there?
No.
No, I don't think it's anything particularly woo about the skeleton, apart from the fact that, you know, it's the first ritualistic burial that we have a record of on Earth. So in that way, it's significant. But yeah, this Moyle site at Point Ritchie is the really exciting one. As far as mainstream, what's happening in the mainstream goes. But I mean, you've got connections to Gobekli Tepe.
Well, that's something I was going to ask you about, because you mentioned Bruce Fenton, and I seen he had a page dedicated to Australia. And the first headline that I read here is "A Global Aboriginal Australian Culture, the proof the proof at Gobekli Tepe," and it shows you, for the benefit or for radio listeners out there, it's like a horseshoe and then a line and then a horseshoe in the opposite direction below it, and then it also shows you a picture of a medicine man of the Wargaya. Or you guys will be able to pronounce that better than me, but that looks very, very similar, right?
Better. That's right, it does. And there are some other things as well at Gobekli Tepe that show a connection with Australia. So there's a figure as well of a woman. There's a figure of a woman from, hang on, let me just get this up. Yingara. It's a picture of Yingara, which is, hang on, trying to find where it's from. I know it's from Northern Territory somewhere, but it looks almost exactly the same. And there's a picture there, Kev, of it. I'm not sure. Would you like me to get it for you up and resend it to you? Or?
Did you already send me it? Because I've got that folder of pictures right here somewhere, and I can share them with
Yes, I did, yeah. So there's a picture of a woman and another one next to it from Gobekli Tepe.
Okay, 2 seconds.
It's like a rock art painting, and then there's a picture of the same figure from, is it up the top there, up the top right, other right, yeah.
That one there?
Yeah.
Okay, if I put that on the screen here, blow that up a little bit, people can see it. There you go, and I'll share that in the chat room over at TFR right now.
So there's another, so that's another picture that connects Australia to Gobekli Tepe. And there's a couple more, I think, as well, even. Yeah, so back in sort of hundreds of thousands of years ago, Sunda and Sahul were like a bigger version of Australia now when the water levels were lower. The landmass was bigger, and we were sort of connected through Southeast Asia. We could basically walk to the Middle East. So it's more than plausible that this Aboriginal culture might have been a worldwide culture at some point.
Well,
and we can see
that kind of makes me that kind of makes me think of the Gosford Glyphs, because you see these almost Australian type hieroglyphics, right, as we're told, and ancient aliens say, how are they there? But perhaps, you know, that information, that language, I don't know, went the other way.
The Gosford Glyphs are an interesting subject, Kev. I have not been there, and I would love to go have a look. It's been dismissed by a lot of mainstream people here in Australia. I know Stephen Strong has done an amazing amount of work on it, and I've read a fair bit of his stuff and listened to him talk. He's a great talker. But, I mean, we've also got a pyramid here too that's quite interesting in Australia.
Let's focus on Gosford for now, though. So with the Gosford Glyphs, basically it's a bunch of Egyptian hieroglyphs that were found just outside of New South Wales in the 70s. The local Aboriginal people speak of a time when Egyptian people came here and they gained knowledge from the local Aboriginal medicine men. They were technologically quite advanced, but not as spiritually advanced as what Aboriginal people were seen to be. And so there's a record of these two brothers who are supposedly sons of Khufu, who came to Australia on a pilgrimage, like their forebears had done before them. And one of them, it records in the stone about how one of these brothers was bitten by a snake and actually died while he was here. The body hasn't been found, but some interesting things have been found at Gobekli at Gosford, including a piece of aluminium jewellery. You know, there are UFO glyphs as well there. It's a hotbed of UFO activity.
That's what I was going to say, guys. I was going to say, listen, but the first time I seen them, I had to kind of look twice, and I'm thinking, come on, this is looking like UFO type kind of signal or symbols going on here. What do the Aboriginal people say about visitors from the stars, things like that? Would that tie in with?
So, but going back to the dreaming just quickly, most dreamings are regional specific because they have to be about the local land and specifics for that area. But there is one Dreamtime story which is shared by all Aboriginal people, and it's called the Seven Sisters. And it's actually about the Pleiadians, and every single Aboriginal tribe shares this same dreaming story, which is really interesting. And every Aboriginal tribe talks about sky beings being creator ancestors that came down from the sky and basically created man and taught us and gave us our laws and our rituals, etc. So every tribe has that same dreaming, which is really interesting.
That is, and I mean, I'll bring Dan in here as well. I mean, Dan, that really is quite compelling that all the tribes share that story. It's something that's like a very kind of.
I think there was a picture just sent to you of Australia, and it had all different colours.
Yep, I'll pull that up just now. Yep, there it is there.
That's the map of Tyndale. That's all the different. Yeah, sorry, you go.
So that was Tyndale, who was a famous researcher here in Australia, and so that's every single Aboriginal nation or tribe here in Australia. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of them.
Very varied.
Yeah, and they're all different.
And they are all different. So, for instance, the didgeridoo is only played by the Yolngu people up in Northern Territory, but it's amazing how ubiquitous the didgeridoo has become with Aboriginal culture. Yet it's only one tribe that play that didge, and if any other tribes want to play it, they have to actually ask for permission from those Yolngu people. So
now, when it comes to the actual didgeridoo, is there anything related to like healing or medicinal powers? Because I'm thinking about the vibration that's caused. Listen, it's quite funny. I had a mate in the army, Dan, Jess, and he was trying to get off the drink. He was drinking far too much, right? One day he came back to camp and he had this didgeridoo with him. No joke, real story, right? He'd seen a didgeridoo in a second-hand shop. And he says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to lock myself in the room at night. I'm going to teach myself how to play the didgeridoo. And the whole building would be vibrating every time we would get in from work. This thing was amazing. But it is used in medicinal purposes, right, when it comes to that kind of thing?
Definitely. Well, your body emanates an electromagnetic frequency. And I suppose some people call it your aura. And it can be analyse. It's a vibration, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a frequency. It's a vibration that your body puts out. The didgeridoo also puts out a frequency or a vibration. So by attuning yourself to that vibration, then it's a healing sound. It's made.
They reckon it's similar to a cat purring, or it has a similar frequency to the Om as well. If you chant Om and you hit that certain frequency, you can feel it start vibrating through your head and through your mouth, and it's that same sort of frequency. So it is a healing vibration, and it is used in healing ceremony and in ritualistic ceremony as well. And Dan knows how to play it. He taught himself as well, and gosh, it was annoying when he was unable to circular breathe yet. He would just take the biggest breath he could and just blow out and go for gold, and then he'd run out of breath and then he'd start again, and it was so irritating. But now he knows how to circular breathe, so it's not as annoying.
You're my type of guy, Dan. I like your style. Definitely like your style, dude. You'll need to teach me how to do the boomerang as well. That's obviously another thing from down under. But guys, can go...
It's incredible how it feels as well, because Dan's done some healing for me before as well, when for some of our friends it's kind of I don't want to say party trick, because it's worthy of more respect and reverence than that, but there's quite a few of our friends that come around and ask for a bit of a session from Dan on the didge. Because when it's played throughout your aura, you can really feel it.
I think I would be round getting them to play the didgeridoo as well. Now, guys, I hope you can hang out with me after the break as well, because there's so much we've still to get into, and I've kind of dragged you all over the place, and we can go back to Gosford, but this has been fantastic so far. And before we do go to the break, I want to ask you, the Aboriginal people, how do they view today's world? What do they think about the world that we're living in today, what we're doing to it?
That's a really good question, Kevin. It's a really interesting one, because the feeling in Aboriginal communities at the moment is really sad. It's almost one of they've given up. They feel like they don't have that connection to their land, has sort of been severed. Well, not severed, but it's been very much hindered through the stolen generation, and the fact that, the government policy was to remove children from their families, and this has ripped the heart out of Australian Aboriginal culture. A lot of people are displaced. They don't even know what culture they belong to, some of them. And so it very much is a feeling of, and alcohol is a real issue in communities. It's a very sad, sort of despondent feeling when you go into these communities, because they're not living how they lived for thousands of years. They get what we call the dole, or social security money, and they call it sit-down money. So because they feel obliged to sit down when they receive that money, and so I think for a lot of them, they feel lost. They feel, utter despair and despondent. And it's really only the old ones, the elders and that still sort of retain this knowledge and this deep knowledge. And, a lot of the young ones just aren't interested, and that's really sad. It's really sad. There's a lot of anger in these communities, and a lot of grief.
As technologically advanced as we are, and we most certainly are, I think if we don't listen to people like the Aboriginals, people who have that knowledge, true knowledge, of how things used to be, if we don't learn from these people and almost go back to some of those ways, then I don't think it matters how technologically advanced we get, guys, because, we're not learning anything if we can't respect where we've come from and actually get interested in these stories as well, if that makes sense.
That's right. And if some of the farmers would just reach out and ask for help from these traditional landowners, things could be handled so much better. The resources could be handled so much better. The land could be handled so much better. But there is no mutual respect happening. There's no asking them for help It's very much an us versus them kind of attitude. Australians are very racist, and they don't have a very high regard for Aboriginal people, which is really sad.
That is, and we're on the break, and when we come back, I'll get Dan and Jessica to give you all the best websites to check out. Don't go anywhere. Alright, guys, these are fantastic, and of course, we're still here on YouTube, but I'm having a blast. And listen, I'm really sorry we've ran over time.
That's okay.
Partly on purpose, partly accidental, but I'm enjoying this, and you know, there's so much more I want to ask you. I want to get into the Gobekli Tepe, the pyramids, things you have seen when you were going around on your travels as well. But when we come back after the break, I think that would be a good chance to give people maybe one or two websites where they can go and look at this information themselves, because I would love for people to learn more about the Australian kind of culture and things, because we don't know enough about it. And of course, it could hold a very... Oh, there's a super chat from Karen. Thank you so much.
Amazing info, hungry for more.
Exactly. I think we've all fallen in love with Dan and Jess tonight. This has been great so far, guys. But yeah, and I hope that made sense there when I was saying it. There's that saying, if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it type thing. Not quite meaning that, but I think we need to get back to that more kind of natural, holistic kind of way of living. And at the same time, have our technology, but make it more in balance. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting, if you speak to the Aboriginal elders, they very much believe in time being cyclical and things coming in cycles. And they very much are of the opinion that a time is coming again where we will be living more in harmony with the earth and going back to some of the old ways, and we will be asking them for their advice on that. So they very much believe that is coming in the future. So, the old people haven't lost hope. So that's a good thing.
That's very encouraging. Very, very encouraging.
And they are the ones that have the knowledge. They are the ones that understand this land. They are inexorably connected to it on such a deep level. And these places throughout Australia, there's real power there. There's real powerful places. And these people are the caretakers, and they understand how it all works on a spiritual level. So we really need to be, we need to be asking them for advice. We need to be coming to them. We need to have a bit of humility and not think that we have all the answers, because look at the bushfires. We clearly don't.
Very well said. Very well said. Now, we're going to be going back to the network in just a moment, folks. We've got 1 hour left to go. Hopefully I can steal Dan and Jess for that time. And again, Dan, I'm so excited here. We're going all over the place. But I remember you mentioned a pyramid in Australia as well. Now, I've talked about pyramids everywhere, but never Australia, man. What's going on there?
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to talk about it, whether it would trigger algorithms or how all the technology works. It's not very, very well known in Australia or popular, really.
Hold that thought, right? Because we're going to come back onto the network in just a moment. And I think, oh, wow, how did I not know about this? Dang, dude, dang.
The Gympie Pyramid.
Gympie Pyramid.
Gympie.
Yeah, he's got it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, folks. Okay, right, stand by. We're going back to the network in a moment.
In the middle, at the top, the Aboriginal sign is...
Yeah, but that's not the pyramid itself.
So this pyramid's hard to see. That's the issue.
Okay, we're going to go back and for people in the audience right now, I'll pull this up on the screen when we go back on. Here we go. We're going back on air right now. Here we go. Welcome back. Hour number 2 on today's Kev Baker show. And am I excited? Yeah, it's one of these shows where it's all the stuff I love to get into. So I apologise to the audience, because just when Dan and Jess are getting into the real information, I'm hitting them with questions, I'm interrogating them, I'm dragging them here, there, everywhere. They're going to think they've gone 10 rounds with Anthony Joshua by the time we come off this show, you know what I mean? But guys, it's because I really appreciate your time. I like to hear your take on all of these things that we love to talk about on here. And Dan, let me come to you, brother, because it may have seemed like I had almost like ignored you when you mentioned this in the first hour, but it's because again, it's this excitement, right? And I'm certainly
I
not.
got excited.
Yeah, I'm not trying to hide the information on an Australian pyramid. What's going on there, man?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't been there. I've been trying to plan a camping trip with the family so I can go and have a look, but we haven't been there yet. However, the pyramid is barely recognisable. There's terraces that have been built there, and it's on sacred site, as that picture shows. So it's
There have been some interesting artifacts found there in association with that pyramid.
Some believe the figurine is of Thoth.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a figurine found that looks very much like early depictions of Thoth.
It's kind of hard to validate a lot of these things, though, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Who was the guy that worked on it?
Well, you know, guys, let's think about it another way. Let's think about this a different way, right? With the size of Australia, and I think people don't appreciate just how big Australia is. It's massive, right? I think we find pyramids on every other continent so far, arguably even Antarctica. I'd be surprised if there wasn't a pyramid somewhere on Australia.
And apparently there have been several, but some of them have been destroyed. And in the early days when settlers first came here, apparently there was another pyramid that was completely destroyed. It was just basically bulldozed. So obviously it's something that
and I love
the mainstream don't want us to know about.
It's a typically Australian name, the Gympie Pyramid. I love it. Absolutely love it. Brilliant.
But I think the important thing here is that Australia is such an ancient land, and it's so old and ancient, and things like Uluru, or I think you guys know it as Ayers Rock. Ayers Rock is the English name for it. So the geologists here, that's a sandstone monolith that the nearest town to Ayers Rock is 450 kilometres away.
It's probably the most sacred place in Australia. It's considered the heart of Australia.
I think it's one of the most amazing sites in the world. It truly is.
It's a sandstone arc rose feldspar sedimentary rock. And what you see, I believe, is only a third of it. The 2/3 under the ground, similar to an iceberg.
Wow. So really all we're seeing is like just like you say, the tip of the iceberg. The main body of that's
correct.
Underneath.
And there's many Dreamtime stories associated with Uluru. There's a dozen ancient ancestral beings that lay in Uluru, and it's very, very significant here in Australia.
But I think one of the main things that's really interesting is some work by Robert Kuhn. There's a picture I sent you there, Kev, of the two big energy lines that cross the Earth, and they are the natural, that's the one, the natural yin and yang energy currents of the Earth. One is called the rainbow serpent, which is a very prominent figure in Australian Aboriginal dreaming. And the other one is known as the plumed serpent. So the rainbow serpent is the one that runs through Australia there, and that's the female aspect, or the yin energy. And the other one, called the plumed serpent, which is associated more with Eastern cultures, is the yang or the male aspect of the energy. And all of the, getting into a bit of new agey stuff, all of the Earth's chakras are placed along those, either one of those two energy currents.
But now I've sussed it. Look at that. Look, that energy line goes all the way through Scotland, up tickles Norway, and then down.
Yeah, Glastonbury.
Yeah, down through. Okay, we'll just shift it up to Scotland. Scotland would be cooler than Glastonbury. Then it goes down to Australia. You see, this is why Scottish people and Australia people get on so well.
They're connected.
Yeah, we all love our. We definitely love a beer. We definitely love a laugh. And now look, we're getting the science of why this is, guys. You see, I'm telling you, we're breaking new ground here tonight.
It's interesting on the other photo you got. It says Australia bans tourists from climbing Uluru, and that's an interesting thing because tourists have been taking rocks and sand and things from Uluru and taking them home as ornaments and mementos, and this has been giving people bad juju, bad luck. And the Uluru Katachuka National Park office get on average about 3 to 5 parcels a week of people sending back pieces of the land because they're getting bad luck from it.
Whoa.
So Uluru is actually the start of that rainbow serpent current, and it's also the end of it. So that's why Uluru is so significant, because it is actually the beginning and the end point of that rainbow serpent energy current.
It's
so it started here and it ends here.
There's almost something mystical about it. Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when you look at the pyramids. For me, you're in awe of what you're looking at there.
This is quite bigger than the Giza pyramid. It's taller than the Eiffel Tower.
And the stories associated with it go back about 30,000 years older than the pyramids. So,
well, if you've got any more stories associated with this rock, please share them with me. Please do, because I'm fascinated, guys.
So the rainbow serpent, the stories associated with the rainbow serpent in Australia are that she arrived soon after the All-Father or the creator being spirits, and there was nothing on the land apparently before rainbow serpent arrived here, and rainbow serpent carved out the rivers, the valleys, the hills. Basically most of the landforms were carved out by its writhing body as it moved across the land, and it came from the ocean, which when you look at that energy current, you can see it does on the southeastern part of Australia.
Every civilization, right, it seems to be when you go back in time, and the further you go back, the more it seems to appear. It's this serpent symbology, right? It's everywhere.
That's right, exactly. Yep, exactly right. And Australia is no exception. So, that serpent symbology is the same throughout the East as well. And when they talk about the serpent in their lands, they're referring to the plumed serpent, which is that masculine energy. So it's really interesting when you start going back and you find all this same iconography throughout all Indigenous societies, whether it be, the Africans or, the South Americans. You've got Quetzalcoatl there. Here it's the rainbow serpent. I believe this is all the same thing.
Yeah,
and
same here.
Yeah, very much.
Just to put it into a bit of perspective, geologists have given Uluru a date of around 550 million years old.
550 million years. But we can't even we can't imagine that, eh? That's too big a number.
No. Yeah, it's geological time, that's for sure, not human time.
Wow. Now, I mentioned the pyramids there, guys. Let me take you on a little archaeological tour then. What's your take on the pyramids at Giza? What's going on there?
This is Dan's favourite.
Come on, Dan. Look at Dan. I can see that.
Take?
Yeah, I mean, are we told the true story? Who built it? How did they build it? I'll tell you where I come in on it, Dan, right? I'll lay out my kind of idea first. What we see at the
Well,
Giza... what we
I
see
like
at...
Christopher Dunn's interpretation. He's a, I don't know if you know of Christopher Dunn, but he's a engineer, and he looks at it as though it's a piece of machinery. It's got very practical uses. It's not, as an archaeologist, you would expect to find a lot of, decoration on the walls. You would expect to find a lot of things that you do not find in the pyramids. So that says to me that it was definitely more for practical use and not for ritualistic or burial uses.
Absolutely, I'm so with you. And I think what we see after that, the pyramids that came after that were pretty crap, let's face it. They got worse over time instead of better. So I think the dynasties were obviously trying to pay homage or pay tribute to
the pre-dynastic power.
Whoever it was that built that. And I'm on the power plant thing as well. That's where I think we kind of come in with the pyramid. But Dan, what's your take on it all, man? I'm seeing you sitting there. The cogs are going round. Talk to us, man.
I just wish that would turn them on.
What do you think it was for then? Let me ask you that.
Oh, that's a good question. I think there was many uses for the pyramids. One, it sort of sits on top of the floodplain of the Nile River, so of the aquifer system coming off the Nile, and with the chambers and things like that run through the Giza pyramid, I wouldn't be surprised if it was an energy harnesser of some sort.
Very similar to the Tesla towers in design, in how there are aquifers under there. So it's like mechanical energy could very well be a possibility. And to this day, there's still energy readings from the apex of the pyramid. You still get quite a bit of energy there.
Yeah, we had Chris and Cherie Geo, who run TFR. They were in the subterranean chamber underneath it, and they got 4K footage of some of the rocks down there, and you can literally see them all sparkling. So there's a crystalline kind of aspect, a quartz aspect to the rock. But like you say with the water there, when you run that water across that type of rock, then I think we are looking at some electrical generation. We might not recognize it today, perhaps, but they were definitely doing something more than just...
And like we were talking about frequencies and vibrations and energy before, I think that's almost the key to a lot of Indigenous cultures, because they could understand it and read it and use it to their benefit, and I think it might have even kept everybody in a state of euphoric excitement, like almost like a drug for people. And
when you look at things like I was talking about earlier about time being cyclical and there being different periods throughout history, I believe very much so that we've had other advanced civilizations before now, and that we are not the most advanced civilization we've had on this planet. And therefore that would mean that time is cyclical. And if you look at the precession of the equinox, and the Vedic texts say that, we've had periods of where we've had golden ages, and then we've had periods that would just come out of the Kali Yuga or the Dark Ages, where our consciousness is quite low. And one of the theories going around about the pyramids is that it was a way to sustain their level of knowledge from higher knowledge time. So from more of the golden age knowledge, it was a way of preserving that knowledge in a physical sense for as long as they could, basically knowing that they were descending into lower states of consciousness. So that's another theory that I've heard.
Wow. Just lay down the mic and walk off now, Jess. Boom.
Mic drop.
I tell you, Dana, she definitely has got it going on. No, this is great stuff. It really is. Now, Gobekli Tepe, let me continue our little tour, right? Because Gobekli Tepe throws a massive archaeological spanner into the given timeline of the Egyptian dynasties and the pyramids, and there wasn't civilization before that yet. Gobekli Tepe, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, We're going back, what, 11,000 years?
Oh, I would love to go there.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
Big time.
between 11 and 12,000 years. So that's roughly double the age of what we've previously thought had to be the oldest civilization. So before that, we were thinking in Samaria was the oldest city, and that dates back to about 6,000 years ago. So this would be double that time period. So it rewrites its history once again. So it's a very exciting
and isn't it
site.
only like
and hardly
something...
any of it's been excavated. So.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing. From what I've heard, it's maybe 10% excavated. So again, the tip of the iceberg. So,
and it was buried obviously as well.
That's what I was going to ask you guys. I was going to ask you, that's the really intriguing, interesting part, because it seems to have been deliberately filled in. So this must have been a massive undertaking, you know, well, or was it? Because they probably had technology that we're not accounting for right now. So we had an undertaking of work. This was something very deliberate. They were trying to mark something, do something. And not only that, not only did they fill it in, but that means that they knew, or they had knowledge of where they were in the cycle, because they obviously seen a cataclysm coming, right?
Yeah, that is the theory. And so
who do you think it was? Who are these lost people?
Well, Bruce Fenton seems to be convinced that it was part of an Aboriginal global culture. So, you know, Aboriginal people, when they fight, when they go to war, they choose a place to go and fight. They fight and then they go home. No one takes anybody's land. No one takes anybody's women. No one rapes anybody's children. They live in this harmonic sense of, you know, they respect the law of the land. And we believe that at one point the whole of the world lived like that. And that it was only been in the last 5,000 to 10,000 years that something has happened whereby we're told that, you know, we're belligerent, we're competitive, we're a warlike people. You know, you go and learn history and you learn about wars. You don't learn about us being, you know, people that get along and cooperate. And we're fundamentally a cooperative species.
I think somebody hijacked this cycle, because I like what you're saying there, how, you know, you think, and I'm with you. I think we did all around the world used to have a far different way of life. I think we also had access to more than our 5 senses, and that might tie in with what you were saying, Dan, about the pyramid maybe generating a frequency that lifts us up, you know, above that.
Look, I definitely believe levitation is real.
Yep.
By using sound harmonics, you can beam frequencies into objects and they can be levitated. That is scientific fact.
Well,
you know, if we can do it on a small scale, they can do it on a large scale. But there's so many abilities that humans used to have as well. I think telepathy.
To this day, Aboriginal, medicine men in Aboriginal tribe, like clever men, have a lot of these abilities. You know, they can talk to animals, they can talk to wind spirits, and you know, fishing cooperations with dolphins and things like this. There's actual scientific journals have been written on cooperative fishing with cetaceans, with whales and orcas and dolphins and stuff. So it's just incredible what these people were capable of with no monuments, with no technology.
That's an interesting one, Kev. The Aboriginal people used to use their spears, and what they'd do is they'd splash it in the water to act like mullet, which is a small fish here in Australia, and the dolphins would hear and they'd be able to communicate with the dolphins and the orcas, and they would herd in all these fish into the tributaries or areas where the Aboriginal people could then grab the net and scoop up a whole big feast for the whole tribe in one cooperative fishing effort between the dolphins and the people.
That is
Yeah,
amazing. Absolutely amazing. And for
There are
people,
many eyewitness accounts of it. Yeah.
for people out there that might think right about now they might be rolling their eyes and things, here's a way of thinking about it. There's TV shows about like dog whisperers and cat whisperers and horse whisperers. You know, it's nothing new that there can be communication between humans and animals. And I do think at one time, maybe many times, guys, many cycles we've had where we've had that almost utopia where we have lived in harmony with everything.
Dolphins are an interesting creature, aren't they? I almost believe that they're more highly evolved than us in some aspects. So
I agree with you. You know what else as well? The octopus. That is
yeah,
It's
definitely.
like an alien creature. But yeah, no, these people were so in tune with the land that they could read the twinkling of stars, and you know, depending on what colours they'd seen these particular stars or how fast they'd be twinkling or whatever, would tell them different things, like when seasonal changes were upon them, or when it was time to, you know, when it was a good idea to go out and catch fish, or when it wasn't. You know, they could literally read the twinkling of the stars and would tell them this information. And depending on how initiated you were in a tribe, was dependent on how much information you'd be given about certain things. So you'd have just a basic level of information that everybody has, you know, regarding subsistence and economic stuff. And then, you know, the more initiated you would become, the more information you would be given regarding, you know, being able to speak to spirits and to the animals and to determine weather. And you know, they've got the rainmakers up in Northern Territory that sing the rain, that are capable of doing that. You know, it's pretty incredible what these people are capable of doing, and because they don't have a vast material culture that they've left behind, they oftentimes just get written off as backwards.
You know,
And
maybe
as,
with what we're seeing in
advanced.
Australia right now, and it's really hard to find any crumb of comfort anywhere, but maybe a crisis like this might be enough to make people rethink their relationships. You know, maybe if people were living more in harmony, the Aboriginal people and the other people out there in Australia, and they came together, and what we're hearing here, you know, maybe we can use this as an opportunity. I know it's very pipe dream kind of stuff, guys, but we live in hope, right? Because if we don't get back to that more harmonious way of living, well, we just need to look at how things are getting worse year upon year.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. So, yeah, we just got to try and get this information out and have more people understand the Aboriginal way of looking at things.
Now, when we come back after the break, I'll drag you around on even more archaeological hotspots. But I can't remember if we gave people websites to go and check. I know we were going to. But I've had that much
yet.
fun tonight. See, I keep forgetting. So tell people a couple of websites where they can go and dig into this stuff themselves.
Okay.
So the jaywon.org, JAWYON, is so that's the local community in Barunga in Arnhem Land.
That one's not loading up.
Maybe.com. Anyway, so, and also Stephen and Evan Strong, I saw somebody mention those in the chat room. They are brilliant. They father and son team. They're the ones that do all the stuff on the Gosford Glyphs, and he's just got so much interesting stuff to say. He goes on country quite often with Aboriginal elders, and he's got friends all over Australia, elders from many different tribes, and he's just got that many amazing stories to tell. That's Stephen Strong and his son Evan Strong. They were he was a teacher for years and taught Aboriginal studies, but he sort of got out of the game because there were some things he wasn't happy with what they were teaching, and they weren't telling the truth. Basically, the truth as he sees it, and so he got out of that game a while ago, and he's just been bringing the truth from the Aboriginal people ever since. And so he's really good to look up. And Max Eigen, obviously, who you're having on the show next week, he's fantastic to follow for all the bushfire information. I'm just trying to think.
So that website, Kev, is spelled JAWOYN.org.au. Yeah.
Okay, folks, we'll be back in 3 short minutes. Don't go anywhere.
.au on the end.
There we go. So it's .au, not .org, right?
Yeah.
There we
.org.
Yeah, .org.au.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's see.
You know what?
There we go.
Yay!
I'll drop that link in the chat room. But guys, I apologize for keeping you here for the full show. I've kidnapped you. But
It's fine.
don't be telling the Australian police. Is it ASIO you guys have got down there now? The security kind of.
Yeah, that's like NSA. Yeah.
You see, this is another thing, guys, right? And this could be another whole show, but I don't think people outside of Australia, and maybe people like myself who actively check the news down there, I don't think they realise how big a police state, New World Order, globalist hotspot that Australia is. I compare it to Scotland. One of our
we're a testing ground.
yeah, one of our ex-leaders, Alex Salmond, he was quoted as saying he would love to see an independent Scotland being the beta testing ground for globalist programs. His own words, right? But that's the way I see Australia, because you're almost like the canary in the coal mine when it comes to police state stuff, because some of the things they roll out in Australia first, it's because nobody's looking. Not enough people are talking about it. And then and then it comes to the UK and then to America. So I definitely don't lose sight of the fact that you guys are really, really in the heart of this globalist madness.
Yeah, well, like you said, Kev, nobody hears much about Australia, so it's easy to get away with some of their more nefarious things that they get up to down here. And yeah, Dan very much believes that we're like a testing ground. If something happens, he always comes out and says, "See, they're testing us again." Like for example, when we had those power blackouts a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we got a power problem here in South Australia, and when it gets really hot, they tend to disconnect our power.
Because days and days, sometimes for 5-6 days at a time.
Our government has sold off a lot of our assets, water, electricity, things like that. So it's made it difficult for general day-to-day living now in Australia, and you know, it's not probably as easy as it used to be here in Australia. Now we have to have 2 people working to survive. You know, you can't necessarily afford a mortgage in Australia anymore. That's becoming beyond the reach of people.
Yep.
And yeah,
I think that's
tough.
I mean, I think that's by design worldwide, Dan. I think you would probably agree with me on that.
I'm not on Facebook, I'm not sure.
But we'll be coming back after the break. And but folks, do keep an eye on Australia. You know, we're seeing the similarities in what's happening with California the past couple of years now as well, with the land that's involved in some of these fires being earmarked for other purposes, shall we say. And I'm going to be interested to hear what Max has got to say on Monday. So I want everyone to let anyone know that willing to listen that Max Egan will be here Monday on the Kev Baker Show. We'll come back in about 15 seconds or so. Final segment, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in. It's been an absolute blast. I hope we can get Dan and Jess back on in the near future, because I hope they've enjoyed it half as much as I have. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, no, we've had a great time. It's been
You had me worried there. You had me worried. You had me worried there. I seen Dan nudging you, going, "Yeah, just tell him you had a great time. It's okay." Just tell him.
No, it's been really good. I've been really, really nervous. So
here we
Dan
go.
never gets nervous.
Here we go. I'll bring it back. Here we go. Welcome back for the final segment of today's Kev Baker Show with our very special guests First time on the radio, definitely not the last time. It's Dan and Jessica Knigge. Now, guys, I've been pronouncing it Knigge. Is that how you pronounce your surname yet, or is it Knigge?
Niggy. Yeah.
Knigge. Knigge.
Yeah.
See,
It's Dutch.
like Gimpy, but Knigge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
It's his
Australia,
last
man.
name.
Look at Dan. Look at me sitting there like a cool cam pro. He's just taking it all in his stride. He's loving it. Poor Jess.
I know, he never gets nervous.
It's okay. You've got the nerves for the both of you. But guys, I really want to thank you on air. This has been really, really good so far. It's great to talk to real people, and especially about the topics I'm into, and also, you know, for what we opened up the show with today, talking about the more serious side of what's going on in Australia right now. And during the break, we were talking about how maybe Australia is somewhat a canary in the coal mine for a number of reasons. But I think because it's so far down under, you know, people tend to forget about what's going on there. And the mainstream media, they definitely play their part in that. They rarely tell us anything that's going on in Australia. But with that said, it seems to be, and Dan would agree with me for sure, that when it comes to globalist / New World Order / police state kind of agenda, and the kind of surveillance and the measures that they try to roll out, you could do a lot worse than keep your eye on Australia, because it seems to me that even before the UK, they trial some of these programs, and then you see them coming to the UK, to the US, maybe 6-12 months later. So I urge everyone, keep your eye on the ball in Australia. Follow Max Egan. Guys, is there anyone else you can think of in Australia? Is it a big alternative media scene down there? I mean,
No,
no.
not really. No, and especially not for archaeology, which is sad. So we want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to come on your show and talk about it, because there isn't enough people talking about it.
That's what see. I thank you guys, because when I go back to when I started on here near 6 years ago, I used to say real people, real radio, and you are as real as people can be. And like I said in opening, it's great to speak to the big names, but it's good to hear the new people coming into specific fields like archaeology, science, you name it. And that's why I like speaking to real people on the ground.
Well, I think that's the issue, Kev, is that science is so compartmentalised now. And you go to any university and the geology side's one side of the campus, the archaeology side's on the other side of the campus, and yet they're so related. You know, the dating that we do is straight out of the stratigraphic layering in the soil, and yet we've got to travel to the other side of the university to get those tests done. So it's bizarre the way it's set up. And we need a multidisciplinary approach to things like this. We need chemistry, we need physics, we need archaeology, and we need people from every aspect, you know. And I'm no intelligent person by any means. I've had to work to get my archaeology degree. But the thing with science is it doesn't necessarily take just intellect. It needs an emotional response. It needs a creative aspect to it as well. It needs people to think on their feet, and you know, it takes a lot more than just numbers and calculators, that's for sure.
Very well said. Now, let's go to a different dimension in a world where I've got bajillions of money, okay? And if I could give you two the funding to go anywhere in the world, any archaeological site, any of your interests, where would be the one place that the two of you would just love to go and dig for answers?
Well, that's changed in recent times, because if you asked me that question 5 years ago, I would have been on the first plane to South America.
Yeah.
However, now I think I'd rather just get my Holden wagon, put a tent in the back of it and go back to Arnhem Land, because there is so much unexplored areas, and you know, some parts of Australia is still pristine. You know, you go through the Kimberleys or the base Kakadu, all through Northern Territory. It's an incredible landscape. And the thing with Aboriginal people is it takes a long time to sit down with them and communicate and talk and get the information. They don't just write it on a piece of paper for you to have.
And they don't like being asked questions either, because their way of learning is through observation. And so they expect you to learn the same or in a similar manner. They don't like being asked direct questions. So you really do have to, like, our experience there was really eye-opening in the fact that you just have to be patient. You just have to sit and listen. And they have a completely different concept of time, as I explained earlier to you. And, time moves so slowly out there. And there's just a real spiritual feeling to Northern Territory. There's something really special up there where they're still living as they have done for thousands of years. And, they've still got their shamans and their clever men and their,
I was going to say
sacred sites.
this almost looks like a paradise that time has forgotten. This looks idyllic. It really does.
Yeah. And they've got the beautiful geothermal pools, at Mataranka, that are just incredible. They're just
Guys, I'm going to be really honest with
mineral
you.
salt infused.
I'd heard of the Northern Territories, but I had no idea. I'd never heard of this place before, ever. Wow.
Yeah, well, these are still their traditional lands where they're free to roam, which is rare because in Australia, mining companies have taken their land and have prevented them from being able to live the way they've lived in the fact that they move around from place to place seasonally, and they can't do that anymore. This is one of the last places in Australia where they still can. As you can see, it's quite a vast section of the top end of Australia.
Where we were, Kev, with that map you've got up the top there, you've got Darwin on the left.
Yep.
Yeah. If you go follow that road down, you come to Catherine.
Yep.
Down again. Yep. So
and Mataranka there, just below Catherine. So Baranga's right in the middle of those two.
And that was the community that we stayed with. It was right up the top of Australia there, right near Catherine. And I could probably tell you one of the most exciting things that I've ever done in my life was in the Barunga Aboriginal community. And we were with the Flinders University. And I was in my professor's nice new four-wheel drive. We're going down this dirt track, and elder Guy Rankin was sitting in the passenger seat. And Jess and I and one of the Aboriginal children were in the back seat with us. And we had our kids with us too. We got a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, two girls, and they both came along for the drive. And as we're driving down this one-way dirt road, all of a sudden, Guy Rankin, the elder, told us to turn into the bush, and there was no track there. It was just a random spot that he told us to take the full drive in. And then that guy says, at the fork tree, we turn right. And all of a sudden, we took one turn, another turn, and everywhere around us, 360 degrees, it was the Australian bush, and I didn't know which way was up or down. And we came through, and we peered through a section, and we're at the base of Kakadu, and the one of the elders there, Rachel, she's an Aboriginal lady, and she stood at the top of this cliff as the wind was blowing through her hair, and she called out in her native language to the ancestors to give us permission and ask permission for us to go down. And we had the special preview of seeing a shelter, Sacred Rock Art site. There was 20,000-year-old rainbow serpent paintings, and being a part of that was breathtaking. And I just can't wait to go back, and there's more research to be done, and that was the best time I've ever had as an archaeologist.
And I must admit, I was looking at some of the rock art today, and I encourage anyone to bring this up. I'll bring up in a second. I was blown away because we're used to seeing all of the kind of petroglyphs from other areas around the world, but these things, absolutely astonishing, and the colors used, absolutely beautiful. It's amazing. And again, why is it? And it's a bit of a rhetorical question, I suppose, but why is it there's not more people talking about this? So I'm really
And
on you go, man.
the Wanjana people, which I think you've got a picture of, almost extraterrestrial looking artwork.
The Wanjinas, yeah, they're white figures with some form of halo or helmet around them, and they're supposed to be creator beings. Now this is another sort of story that's similar across all the tribes, are about the sky beings that had a hand in creating humanity and giving them their rules and their rituals. And so the Wanjinas are from the Kimberley region up in Arnhem Land. But yeah, they're just interesting because they just look so extraterrestrial. They really do.
They look like our modern day Hollywood ETs with the big, the big eyes. That's a stereotypical grey alien for me.
It is.
Yes, exactly. That's right. That's the sort of figures they show in the Ancient Aliens show in Australia and stuff like that. But going back to our experience in Barunga, we did have a very esoteric experience. We're not allowed to actually talk about it in detail because we're not allowed to. They told us we weren't allowed to, but we can say with 100% certainty that the spirits that are still in that place are still very alive and very well. And we had a pretty profound experience involving our daughter and the spirits at that particular rock art site that we went to.
Maybe off air we can tell you.
Off air we can tell you, but we can tell you that, it very much is real. The spirits and what happened, the things that can happen to you up there are very real, and you have to approach it with respect. And otherwise, you're going to find that you're going to need a clever man to help you out, because that's what happened to us, And our professor that we were with was so skeptical about. I mean, she's been working with this community for 30 years and never seen anything like what happened to us with our daughter.
Now, you mentioned the clever man. I've heard this a couple of times now.
Yeah.
Talk to us. I mean, what is the clever man? Is he like the keeper of most of the knowledge? Is it just like it sounds on the surface?
Yeah, that's right. He's the medicine man. He's the shaman. Every Indigenous culture's got one. Aboriginal people call him the clever man. And yeah, he's just like normal everyday guy.
He's basically picked on his ability to have visions and to have, to be able to see interdimensionally. So that sometimes runs in families, sometimes it doesn't. So,
it's very interesting, because when you look at some what they call clairvoyants, or people with the third eye type thing, they say that runs ancestrally as well in the bloodline.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's all expressions of the same thing. I think there are people out there that are definitely more in tune and do see things beyond the veil. They do see the bigger picture, so to speak. And whether they're from the Australian Aboriginals, you're going to get these people all around the world, right?
Yeah, and it's so interesting because to look at him, he doesn't look anything different, like anything
dude.
special.
Yeah, just a dude.
That's right. He just looks the same as all the rest of the people in the community. So yeah.
I got the chance. The clever man. I got to go out with his son and go collect some firewood. And his son, I think, was 7 years old. And I've never met anybody with such bush knowledge in my life as this 7-year-old kid. He was insane. I dropped an axe that bounced out of the ute on the middle of the track, and it was laying in grass up to my waist. And as we're driving, he managed to spot it from about 200 metres away.
There's no way you could have seen that. No. Like a normal person wouldn't have been able to see that.
But their knowledge is great. And do you know, one thing that we haven't even touched on with the Aboriginal people is their kinship system that they have. And the kinship system is the most sophisticated kinship system in the world. And here's this is a book by my professor. I don't know if you can see that.
Country, kin, and culture, yeah.
Yeah. So this basically, because the population is so low for Aboriginal people, that interbreeding could obviously become an issue. And their kinship system is that sophisticated that this never happens, and they're able to keep their genome alive and continue procreating. And that information
goes back to the Dreamtime. Like, it is so ancient. They totally 100% believe that their ancestors that created them gave them that kinship system, and it's not to be questioned. And somebody cannot marry the wrong skin group for their skin group. It's just not done. It's absolutely not done.
Again, that hints at a real high knowledge of genetics and DNA.
Yeah.
Back at a very early time. Wow.
Exactly.
Just wow. Now, how about portals and vortexes? Because I think I've seen on the Ancient Alien show, I'm pretty sure that's the one they were speaking to an Aboriginal gentleman, and they were talking about spirals and vortexes. Anything on that nature?
Yeah. Look, there's quite a few places in Australia that are well known for some funny activity going on. Uluru definitely one of them. There have been sort of stories of, people disappearing there and then reappearing. And there's a portal, apparently a portal near us. Well, it's not sort of near us. It's still like a 4-hour drive, but it's still in South Australia. It's in the Flinders Ranges. There's a place there that they talk about creator beings coming and going, so interdimensional beings coming and going from this portal where if you go and you do ceremony and you do ritual there, you can actually communicate with these beings and see them and things like that. So
wow,
that's somewhere we would love to go and try and find.
Look at that. You just drop it into the conversation. I mean, this is all knowledge to you, but because we hear so little about Australia, this is like wow moments for me. And you know I love my portals and my vortexes and things like that. But again, on a more serious note, because we're coming to the end of the show here, I can't thank you both enough for coming on today. You know, the updates on the fires and then all of this great information as well. I'm sure the audience, if they've enjoyed this half as much as me, that they're going to demand you come back on again in the future. But we've got about maybe 8 minutes left, guys, and I've dragged you here, there, everywhere. What do you want to finish the show with? What would be your message? Any information you've got there? You can go back into the fires. Anything at all, Dan. Get it out there, man.
Yeah, your turn.
Interesting.
Put you on the spot, Dan. Put you on the spot.
I'll talk a little bit more about the dreaming, because I find that super interesting. And there's various levels of meaning with dreaming, and it's a mythological realm of totemic ancestors, and it's got the embodiment of metaphysical potency in the land. It is the law which humans must conform to, and it's the spiritual identity of the individual. So knowledge of the dreaming is an essential element of the Wilpiri people, especially in Arnhem Land, and it's embedded into the landscape. And
it sort of exists in a realm that's separate from our reality, yet is accessible to contemporary existence as well. So it's so difficult to put into words what Dreamtime is, to put it into white fellow words, I suppose. It's just so all-encompassing. But yeah, I truly find it so fascinating. It underpins everything. It underpins their social structure, their spirituality, their cosmology, the knowledge of their land. It's everything. The dreaming and the dream time underpins absolutely everything Aboriginal. So
and you know, there's dream tracks to Australia as well, which help navigate through Australia. They had no issue going from place to place with these stories and these mythologies. They could find their way and follow the seasons, and with fire-stick farming could control the bush, could manage the land with such a low population of people. And they didn't even leave a footprint. You can't even tell that they were here.
So dreaming tracks are basically the paths in between sacred sites and sort of how to get to them. And I find it really interesting that Aboriginal sense of navigation is determined through mythological reference points as well. So whereas we look at direction where we are the centre point and we can see, we determine direction from ourselves, they determine direction and navigation through these sacred places, and that's how they get a reference point of where they are in the world.
And these Dreamtime mythologies are embedded in their songs, in their dancing, in their ceremonial purposes. So it's not just something that they do on a Monday arvo at 4 o'clock. You know, this is a way of life for these people. They live through their mythologies, and they respect their elders, and they respect the ancient land that they live on. And, you know, I think that's a huge thing, because I think a lot of kids these days that are growing up, you know, they're all lost. There's no opportunities for people after they're institutionalised by our education system. Unless they want to work in construction or in an office, you know, it doesn't seem like there's many opportunities yet. Yeah, Aboriginal people and the kids that I have met in Arnhem Land all seem to understand that they've got a purpose in life, and you know, they want to learn about the environment. They want to learn about language and their culture, and you know. They don't care about YouTube and Facebook and these sorts of things. They just want to go swimming in the old waterhole, basically.
That's the way it should be. And we've got a couple of minutes left, but I think on behalf of the entire audience, judging by the TFR chat room, the YouTube chat room, my phone going off constantly, you guys have not only blown me away, you've blown the entire audience away. There's been great info. There's been loads of woo, and I think you've probably inspired an entire audience to dig down deeper into the Australian rabbit hole. I can't thank you both enough, honestly. I knew this show would rock. I knew you would be exactly the way you are, super chilled and super informative. It's been awesome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, Kev. We really enjoyed it, and yeah, I've sort of stuttered and been a bit nervous and sort of gone all over the place a bit.
No, you have been perfect. And Dan, you are a star as well, my brother, honestly. And it would be wrong if I didn't say dang, dude, at least once when I've got you here. You see, there we go. But no, guys, honestly, again, thank you so much. And I would love to get you back on in the future. And for anyone who does want to keep up to date with everything that's going on right now in Australia, please check out Max Egan on YouTube, The Crow House. Check out his channel. He's got a 5-part documentary, I would call it. It's a series of videos, and you're going to be shocked. I'm not even half my way through that video series, and I had to reach out, message Max, and he is going to come on Monday. But it's shocking what you're going to learn, and it's going to go totally against everything you're hearing in the mainstream when they do bother to cover what's going on down in Australia. So again, thank you to Jess, to Dan, to all of our audience down in Australia as well. I know we've got Ken in the chat room. We've got a few other people as well from Australia.
Rockman in there. G'day, mate.
See, all the Australians are in. I don't know, it's that thing where Scottish people and Australians get on. I don't know what it's all about, but we'll definitely roll with it. And don't forget, folks, I'll be back tomorrow with a Freaky Friday with Joe Joseph and Scotty Lopez. We'll be taking a look at who only knows what. Because you know how we roll on Freaky Friday, we don't script anything. These guys will tell you as well, I'm an absolute nightmare behind the scenes. I leave it all to the last minute, and then you just let the natural conversation happen, and you have a brilliant banging show like we've just had here. So when I get off of here right now, I'm going to go get another cup of coffee and probably dive into more of this Australian woo. Again, I think you've given us a lot to think about, guys. I really have. And I hope that some relief comes to the people in the way of these fires in your country. I really do.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, Kev. And thanks to everyone in the chat and everyone listening.
You two are stars. So then, stay tuned, folks. Joe Joseph with the Freedom Link coming up on tfrlive.com. And wherever you are, whenever you are, then he touch that dial and make it TFR. I've forgotten my own outro. We're out of here, folks. No, so we're still on YouTube for a moment, guys. And again, not just saying that for the wider audience. You have rocked. That was brilliant. I've had a blast. I hope you did too.
Phew. Yeah, that's good. I'm looking forward to going back to being a listener, though.
It's not that bad. Look at Dan. Look at him. He's just sitting there quite chilled out, you know?
Hey, look, nothing phases this dude. Nothing. Which I'm glad, because I'm a stress head. So we balance each other.
No, I'm stressed. I hope there's some waves to go surfing this afternoon.
Nice. Are you a cricket man, Dan?
He's not. He's not going surfing.
Do you like your cricket?
Yeah.
I mean, Scottish people don't like cricket, but anytime Australia play England, we love cricket. We love the Australians. So yeah.
We like going to the cricket, not really watching it, but we like going there and drinking.
Yeah, I like the Aussie rules football as well. That is absolutely crazy. I love that kind of thing, man. But guys, it's been great getting to know you a little bit better on air here. I'm looking forward to getting to know you a lot better as well on and off air. You've been an absolute treat tonight. I want to thank you again, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And please, I'll be back. Join me tomorrow for our pre-Freaky Friday show, where I'll be asking you to provide the woo. So until next time, I've got this outro saved, so I know how to do this one. Right, here we go. Keep your mind open. Keep looking for the woo, but not to the point where your brain turns to black goo.